approved it. We prepare a notice for the city clerk's office, and we calculate what the rezoning advertising fee will be. We cannot calculate that fee without the voluntary use restrictions provided to us. So we would not be able to forward it to the city clerk's office until voluntary use restrictions were provided.
And that was my, thank you, Bert. That was kind of what my thought was, is that before we start the advertisement, at the city council level, we will have this meeting, we will get some feedback on voluntary use restrictions and have that list that further restricts down from B5, taking otherwise permitted uses off the table. We have a draft of that document that buyer and seller have looked at, but it's premature until we meet with the neighborhood to hear what their concerns are. In our mind.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say, if we don't have that list, it's premature for us to be voting on it too.
I would also like to note that the conditions list the previous applicant on the Calero J. They're my client, and I know that they're not purchasing this.
Carlos, we were having a hard time hearing you.
I was saying that the staff conditions list Calero J Incorporated. They were the ones who previously tried to purchase this and rezone it. I don't think this is the current applicant's name. If we even go that far, that I just want to point that out to staff that they happen to be my client, and they purchased a different building. And if they haven't,
I'm not familiar with all the parties. I know the property, but I'm not familiar with all the parties that are involved in this transaction. But I know it's zoned R1 currently, and it's been zoned R1 for decades, is my understanding, even though it's been being used for non-residential use. It's been used as a ministry building. Now they want to change it to go to B5 zoning.
Well, I understand what they're changing it to, but the conditions that are listed by staff list the previous applicant's company name and not the current applicant's company name.
So you're saying there's an error on the application?
Yes, I did the conditions 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2. Even if it might not get that far, but if it did, I was just making them aware that Calero J Incorporated is not who the current applicant is.
Got it.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. That was the name of the subdivision plat, though, and if they do need to, or the proposed subdivision plat, if they do need to rename it, they can, as long as they do not change the elements of the plat.
I don't see any problem personally with going to the B5 zoning, but it sounds to me like there's still some preliminary work that needs to be dealt with before we actually vote on it. So I think it needs to be held over for at least one meeting.
I agree.
Mr. Pipes, do you think if we were to hold it over for just one meeting, that would give you time to have your neighborhood meeting and prepare your voluntary use restrictions, or would we need to do it for 2 meetings?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. The buyer and seller fell apart, over this last delay, and we think we've got them back together, but the neighborhood meeting is something that, Councilman Manzi is trying to set up, but it's not the easiest thing to do.
Right, I understand that. And that's why I'm wondering if 2 meetings would give you more time to get all that worked out, because you can't hold it over time and time and time again. So We don't want to be too restrictive, but at the same time, we want it to come to us clean and ready to go.
Right.
Well, we had talked about, dates for a meeting, as early as today, and then it was gonna be next week. But I mean, I feel like one carryover would be better than two, because I'm worried that the buyer and seller may
Okay,
not
Paul, hard again.
hold the deal together if we get delayed. We were encouraged by the recommended approval, and we thought we could just deal with voluntary use restrictions kind of between the two public hearing sessions to try to keep it on timeline, because delay could kill this deal.
Well, my biggest concern is the neighborhood meeting. I just think in all fairness to the people that live in that surrounding area, they have an opportunity to speak and ask questions regarding this, because it will impact their neighborhood.
And they may have some significant input on what your voluntary use restrictions are.
Right.
That's why we've waited to do that until after that meeting.
I'm Vaughn Gardner. I'm one of the trustees for the Mobile Baptist Association. And Mr. Pipes, we're willing to sign that limitations document right now and get it to you if need be. And just know that the Mobile Baptist Association does not object to the rezoning.
No, I believe the buyer and seller are willing to sign the draft of this limited use restriction that we have going. We don't have the input of the neighborhood yet, and that can cause changes to that document. And so I just didn't want 2 or 3 of those versions going around. And so I waited to submit that until after the meeting.
Casey, I really think we're gonna have to have that list before we can vote on the application. I understand the timeline and want to try to help facilitate that, and I agree with Ms. Shirley that we need to have the neighborhood community meeting. But if you're having trouble organizing that meeting, maybe we need to put a time limit on it that you try to get that done. If it can't be done, then we go ahead and bring it back with a voluntary restriction that your applicant is willing to put on it. I do think we need to have that list of voluntary restrictions before we vote on anything.
Agreed.
I think if we had that, you probably could get your approval.
Mr. Pipes, how strong a feeling do you have that your meeting will be next week?
Not very strong.
Not very strong.
We canceled setting it up when the buyer and seller fell apart, and now we're trying to put it back together. But this is all very, I think the reauthorization letter from the seller, just came in the last hour,
Right.
And so I apologize for being that blunt about it, but I mean, I
completely understand your predicament.
until I speak with Councilman Manzi, I don't know how likely it is.
Well, that's my point about holding it over just one meeting. As much as I'd like to say we should do that, that doesn't give you a lot of time. And I do understand your predicament, but I don't believe in all the time I've been doing this that we've had anything come to us where we have not looked at the voluntary use restrictions prior to. And I agree with the other council members that it would not be prudent for us to do that.
Can I ask, Ms. Pappas, is our next meeting, I know when our next meeting is, but our February meeting, do we have a meeting on the 4th?
It's actually on the 3rd, which is a Wednesday. And that was because at the time the schedule was drafted, we anticipated Mardi Gras and parades.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm because I had some calendar confusions and just wanted to make sure I was clear on what the schedule was going to be. Thank you.
Casey, if you can get up with Councilman Manzi and try to get that meeting scheduled. If they can't get it done within 4 weeks, then we'll just have, and you present your voluntary restrictions, that we'll have to vote on that next meeting. But hopefully 4 weeks will give you enough time to work with Councilman Manzi and get the meeting put together.
And maybe some of us could reach out to Councilman Manzi and impress upon him how important this is.
Yeah, I mean, because 4 weeks is plenty enough time to put together a meeting. So that if you can't do it that time, then we'll just have to go ahead and vote on it with your own list of voluntary restrictions.
I was going to offer the applicant or whoever the representative would like to contact my office. Since I represent the council, I'll be happy to make sure that this gets to Mr. Manzi as well, Councilman Manzi, and urge him to contact and hopefully get a neighborhood meeting, even if it's perhaps a Zoom meeting of some sort.
Or even him just calling, because we want them to have their input on the restrictions, or the voluntary restrictions. But if you can only wait so long to get that.
In Councilman Manzi's office, we've been corresponding as recently as yesterday, and I've sent him some things today when we got back on track. So I feel like we're communicating well. It's
okay,
but I appreciate it, and I will follow up, Councilman Rich. And if I can, I see where we're kind of headed. I would like, if there's a way I can communicate with Mr. Hill, I'd like to get his comments, even if they're not, either offline or at the meeting, so we can incorporate his comments.
And Mr. Hill is the gentleman who's waiting to
speak in opposition.
In opposition. Okay, that's what I thought.
Is there an open floor to speak, or do I have to be recognized by the chairman? That's what I was wondering.
I think we may have lost the chairman, possibly.
Oh, okay.
Well, recognize Mr. Hill. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Well, to the commission members and citizen stakeholders of Mobile, good afternoon. Reggie Hill, 1007 Center Street. I am a product of District 2, born and raised there, still reside there. And I wanted to speak today about this. Before I begin, I did want to thank Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Anderson within the staff for being so transparent about this process, made it a lot easier. I'm sure that they do this with all Mobilians who seek to be a part of this meeting. I just want to make a point of clarity before I begin as well. I am not in opposition to the owners of this property, Mobile Baptist Association, the realtors, White Spunner, Mr. Pipes, or the applicant. What I am in opposition to is us continuously not necessarily meeting the needs of specific communities and specific areas. With this zoning change, I believe it will open up the room for more businesses to come into the area that are maybe not necessarily needed now. There's a lot of property in this downtown community that could be a very usable space for what I believe the efforts are for right now. And we need to be looking at exactly what is going to be the best fit for those residents. I was very pleased. That's kind of why I didn't jump in as well. The commission did a lot of the work for me today. I'm very appreciative of that, even if it just meant to hold this thing over so that we can get neighborhood input. Unfortunately, our representation is a bit out of touch from what's going on in the community, so I can understand. I would assume that Mr. Pipes has probably even tried to have these meetings in prior times, but for whatever reason, we have not been able to get that done. So I believe it's totally vital that we have this opportunity. I've communicated with Ms. Sharon Wright, but at that time, we didn't have the resources for purchasing this property. And, I'm just going to be very direct and blunt about this. There are some agencies that do not have the same accessibility to resources that others may have within the community. That doesn't mean that our level of work is not suitable for those resources. It just means that we may not have connected all of the dots with the people who are able to allocate the funding. One of the primary reasons I feel like this zoning is not necessary, to my understanding, the information that was relayed to me based on the zoning that was put in place for NBA Another nonprofit organization would not need to have this rezone in order for us to continue similar work that was being done by NBA prior to wanting to sell the property. And when we're looking at the rec centers, majority of them, because of COVID, sure, are closed down. But even when they were, majority of the times they closed at 6 and 7 p.m. And we don't have an outlet for our youth in this area, really across the city or county, after those hours. And we see with criminal activity rising and increasing, most of those things are being done in the hours where they have nothing else to do. You understand that schools and community centers are closed on the weekends. A lot of the activities are happening then as well. So I believe we should be looking at those organizations that can get into this building and help support improving the quality of life in our communities. There's even a unique cultural significance with this, and I'm getting towards the end of my comments. Thank you all for allowing this time to speak. But a cultural significance. If we remember what this was originally, Success for the Future, we recently brought on a new board member, Mr. Mark Gartman, who runs the MCG Workforce Solutions, and they work directly with port initiatives and things dealing with the sea. And we know exactly what this building was used for those who were traveling by water. And for him to be able to come in now, and we're looking at ways to preserving that history along with making a new mark in the community that's needed, I think it's necessary for us to look at that. And this is something I believe that will be brought to the table within that community meeting. Righteously, I think this is just a very unique time for us to examine the scope of how we can work together. I would love to speak with Mr. Pipes outside of this setting as well, to see where we might be able to find some collaborative means of utilizing the property as well. I hope that we can recreate communications with the realtor to get this done, but we can wait and see what happens in the coming days. I'll be looking forward to that community meeting, but I'm hoping that even with that meeting, we would keep the zoning in a place that would allow similar works to still take place. Right now in this area, I mean, just a month or so ago, there was a 17-year-old killed right up the street from this property. And I believe that it's because certain outlets are just not available for our young people. And so we need to be catering towards that. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions or comments by commissioners? Is there anyone else here to speak for or against this application?
Mr. Chairman, I only entered the three gentlemen, Mr. Pipes, Mr. Gardner, and Mr. Hill.
Okay. Is there anything else that the applicant wishes to say?
Thank you.
That suffices as well.
Just appreciate you letting us meet before you.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no other questions or comments, we'll close the public part of this. Go into commissioner deliberation. Any thoughts or questions by commissioners?
Was it February
Carlos?
3rd that y'all decided on?
Carlos, could you speak up? It's hard to hear you.
Okay.
It might be my connection, but I don't know if anyone else is having difficulty.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Oh yeah, you sound a lot better now.
Thank you.
So was February 3rd, Margaret, was that what you said the next meeting was?
The next meeting's actually February 21st, January 21st. The following meeting is February 3rd, which is on a Wednesday.
Okay.
But did we determine what time or, what was the date that we will hold this over? If we consider holding it over to allow Mr. Pipes and the owner to have that neighborhood meeting?
I think the general agreement is February 3rd.
February 3rd?
In 4 weeks.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'd like to make that motion that we hold it over to February 3rd to allow the parties to get together with the neighborhood and see if they can come up with a good solution.
I'll
Get their
second
input.
that.
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor for a holdover until February?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Items held over until February meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all.
New subdivision applications, item number 2. 68 Kings Way, Parker Way subdivision. Staff recommends tentative approval. Is the applicant here on this or anyone for this particular project?
Mr. Chairman, I've admitted Zeke Hudson, who's a member of Rose Surveying and Engineering. We did receive feedback that they were in agreement with all recommendations and conditions. I believe he's here and available simply to ask any questions. We did not receive any comments, and we have no one present in opposition on this application.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant have any questions or comments?
Zeke? He's not on mute.
We have some gremlins today, don't we?
Doesn't show that he has a sound connection.
He's already indicated that he's agreeable to all the conditions.
That is correct. We had that via email.
Okay,
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
he gave the thumbs up, so we're thumbs up is good enough.
Okay, all right.
I'll
Move to
second.
approve. Second, okay.
Properly moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Item passes. Next item. Item number 3, 4551 Airport Boulevard, Hillview Subdivision. Staff recommends tentative approval. Is the applicant here on this one?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, if I may, first of all, the commission was provided comments from Patricia Heck, who will also be speaking, and Lori Blaylock. I have admitted into the meeting Mr. Mike Speaks with Speaks and Associates, as well as Ms. Heck.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaks, do you have any questions, comments, or additional information concerning your project?
No, sir. We are in agreement with the recommendations of staff.
Okay, thank you. Of those that,
No, sir.
who do we have here to speak against?
Pat? Hello, can
Hello?
you hear me?
We can hear you now. Could you please give your name and address for our records and state your concern?
My name is Pat Heck. Heck is the last name. I live at 263, which is across the street and down one house. I object to this subdividing that one lot into 3 smaller ones. I bought my home here 25 years ago. I'm only the second owner. It was built in the early 90s. I have upgraded it. I have expanded the house. I have kept the yard up. and it was only built in the early 1990s. I own the home outright now for several years. I'm appalled also at the fact that only 2 residents of this subdivision was notified about that gentleman wanting to divide his lot into 3 smaller lots. I feel like this is being rushed through the Planning Commission. For the last 6 to 8 months, my property has been devalued. I mean, for the last 6 to 8 years, my property has been devalued significantly. I have maintained my property. I have improved it inside and out. I have seen rats coming out of that backyard of his. I've seen live chickens come out of that backyard. In my opinion, he's very narcissistic, only thinking of himself. Whenever he would come by, which was not on a daily basis, he would bring junk and debris, which looks like it was gathered elsewhere, and put on his land where it's seen by everybody. And I am totally against this. I'm not moving. I'm not selling my house, but I plan to die here. And all of the other neighbors and owners in this subdivision maintain their house and their yard, some better than others, but he has never attempted to do at least an average job. It's been a trash. I'm finished.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Any questions from commissioners?
I do. Ms. Heck, I have a question.
Sure.
Your letter didn't reference the name of the owner, but one of your neighbors, and I'm sure she'll be speaking next, Ms. Blaylock, indicated his name to be Mr. Burkett.
I have no idea what his name is. At the time I bought my house back in 1995, I was a single parent as a result of the divorce, working 2 jobs to raise and educate my son. And I didn't greet any neighbors, and certainly not him, because I live a couple houses down. So I have no idea of his name, although I do know that Lori, who lives across from Mary Murphy, who's next door to me, refers to him as Al, but I do not know his name.
Well, maybe we can get clarification from Ms. Blaylock, because I'm sort of getting the impression that that's not who's developing the property, but we can figure that out.
Well, what I understood is that that property was left to the owner by his grandparents. I don't know which one or both. And ever since I've lived here, he has never maintained it to, at least minimal care.
Okay.
And I think that subdividing it into 3 smaller lots is going to downgrade the neighborhood. And why weren't more residents of Hillview notified of this? And the 2 ladies that received the certified letters, this happened over the Christmas holiday time. Well, that's a poor time, and it's as if it's being rushed through the Planning Commission.
I don't think we're rushing through anything. Bert, could you address the notification process for her?
Yes, the notification process for a subdivision application is only a certified letter to property owners next to and across the street from the site in question. That is the legal requirement, and that is what we would have done.
And what is the time frame that residents have the choice to respond that is regulated by law?
I believe that the letters have to be sent in the mail a minimum of 1 week prior to the meeting, 5 days prior to the meeting day.
That is very poor planning on whoever's responsible for it part to send it out over Christmas holidays. When
Mr.
people
Chairman.
have more to do. And you know, I only
Mr.
found
Chairman.
out because both of my neighbors called me.
Okay, so it seems to me as if the notification process worked because the people that got the letters did show up to the meeting. And we've heard from Ms. Heck. So who's the next person?
Can I comment to Ms. Heck to bring her some information that she might not be aware of? I don't know if she's seen the report and the recommendations on this. But by subdividing this, it will cut off access to Airport Boulevard. And it's not a rezoning, it's still staying in the R1 because the planning, the traffic engineering is recommending no access off of Airport, and it keeps it more residential in nature. I see what you're saying about not keeping as far as your lot sizes indicative when you look at the general map that's there. But I think protecting it so that it cannot be a commercial, it's becoming more residential, which I think is of value to the area without having any access to Airport Boulevard. They'll have to come in off of your residential street. And I think that's a positive on this. Ms. Heck, do you see what I'm saying here?
I do understand, and I do see your point, but my point as a homeowner, and I've worked as an RN since graduating in 1968 until I retired at the age of 72 in 2019. And I am very unhappy that the value of my property has decreased over the previous 6 to 8 years. And the other people surrounding me have kept up their houses as well.
Right.
So I just think that putting in 3 smaller houses is going to decrease my property value even more.
I hear what you're saying. I'm sympathetic to that, but I think the trade-off is not allowing it to that whole stretch going commercial with access to Airport. I think it's more stabilizing to see it become 3 homes, even though they would be smaller in nature as far as their property. What is the square footage of each of those 3 lots? Can someone in the staff let us know?
Right at 9,800 square feet.
Yeah, that's, yeah, okay.
So
So they
And
meet,
I would also, yeah, I think it's also worth noting that having 3 little houses there is nicer than having one giant rat's nest. I mean,
That's my
I live
concern.
I live in a small house. There's nothing wrong with small houses, especially if they're new. I mean, it's not like they're going to be wrecking property values. It'll probably be better for your property value than the rat's nest you got right now.
Yeah, it seems like that would
I have-
definitely be an improvement over what you've got if that place was cleaned up and cleared out to make room
Well,
for 3 smaller
I
homes.
understand from Lori that there's a gentleman who lives just around the curve onto the cross street to Summit. He bought the house straight across from me, 264. He remodeled the whole thing, although he lives in his house right there at the curve. He's interested in buying that as one property and putting one nice house on that piece of property. So if there's somebody interested in buying it and developing it within the realm of the neighborhood, then why not? Is the owner that narcissistic to be wanting more
Ma'am,
money?
this is Doug Anderson. I'm the attorney for the board, and I'm going to ask you to quit personally attacking the owner of the property, calling him names. It's not proper. So please don't do that anymore.
Thank you, Doug.
I'm just saying he's selfish.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we've heard enough, and I think we can move forward.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's someone else though that's
There is.
waiting
We
to
need hear
address
from this
us.
one.
No, ma'am, there's not. You
Okay.
received comments from multiple
see.
people. but the only two people that have been admitted into the meeting were Ms. Heck and Mr. Mike Speaks, who's representing the application.
We give Mr. Speaks to have comments in response to the objection.
We feel like the 3 lots in this situation with nice homes, they don't have to be big homes to be nice homes, is appropriate for the property. And it's much better than what's there now.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing
I
none.
would like to, Mr.
Okay.
Gain, I'd like to make a comment that the subdivision regulations require it to be a minimum 7,200 square feet. And each of these lots meets those subdivision requirements under our rules and laws. And I understand that the people who object to it do not want smaller homes there, but I'm not sure there's a lot that we could do to get around those subdivision requirements of 7,200 square feet.
I agree.
Right. I have to agree with that. We've got our hands tied to some degree as far as our subdivision codes. And again, to me, the best part is that it will not have access to airport. And that's really a concern for destabilizing those neighborhoods as each one of those gets picked off. So I completely understand, but I think it's helping the neighborhood as much as maybe I would like to say, let's make it 2 lots. I wish I could say that, but we're not waiving any of the codes. The codes are all being met. And I think that these will be better neighbors at the end of the day than what Ms. Heck has had for the last 6 to 8 years, if indeed these become, owner occupied facilities for her to be neighbors. And that's, the notification was all by the books. I wish it was more time too, especially at holidays, but we don't operate like that. So everything's been done by standard. And we got the letters, people were able to weigh in. I think there are legitimate concerns, but it's something where it does make code, and we really have to look at the legal implications of what that means. And to me, it's not a rezoning. They're looking at homes in the future. And this really, I think, cements that, if anything, because the property is subdivided.
Thank you.
I agree with Rich, and it's going to be a definite improvement to the neighborhood to get the property cleaned up and cleared out for the new home. So I'd like to make a motion. We did say the applicant was agreeable to all the conditions, correct?
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
I move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Ms. Denson had to drop off, so she did not participate in item number 3's vote.
Okay. Moving to our group applications. Item number 4, 4464, 4474, Halls Mill Road, Paul Person subdivision, and the PUD, both recommended for approval. The applicant present.
The applicant is present. It's Row Engineering, but again, they were in agreement with the recommendations.
Okay. Applicant is present and in agreement. Do they have anything else they wish to add?
Mr. Chairman, this is Shirley Sessions. I'm sorry, I usually have one computer pulled up with my reports, but since I'm down to one computer, is this the application I remember reading had a sidewalk waiver included? And my question was going to be today, because I couldn't see it from the overhead view. Are there any other sidewalks in this area that they will be connecting to, or there's no sidewalks in the area?
Ms. Sessions, this site does not include a sidewalk waiver request.
Uh-huh.
What had happened is that the portion of the site that you see on the aerial that is developed did receive a sidewalk waiver,
Okay.
but the new portion of the site that's not currently developed, a sidewalk waiver request has not been applied for.
Okay.
So they will need to submit a sidewalk waiver request if they do
For
not
that.
wish to build a sidewalk on that portion.
Okay. All right. I remember reading it, but I just didn't have my notes to refer back to. Thank you.
So, Mr. Hoffman, just for clarification, if they do submit that sidewalk waiver, can that be handled administratively, or does it have to come back before us?
The sidewalk waivers for commercial development cannot be handled administratively.
Okay. They have no plans to develop anything in that spot yet.
Well, they're not showing the provision of a sidewalk, and while a sidewalk would be beneficial since it was waived for the other properties that are currently developed, it gives them a good chance to maybe have it waived for the new site.
Okay.
But they're not asking for that today. That would be a separate application, correct? Okay.
That's correct. Today it's just subdivision and PUD.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Any questions or comments by commissioners? Any additional questions or comments from the applicant?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Hearing none, close public deliberations. We'll take it in two parts.
I'm sorry, did we ask for opposition?
Sorry.
Did we give the opportunity for opposition to speak?
We didn't have any opposition signed up.
Okay.
Mr. Gain, I have a question for the.
Okay.
He's frozen.
Is it your expectation that you will in time?
You're breaking up.
Ms. Latham, you're breaking up. But Mr. Hudson, I think part of her question was, do you anticipate filing for a sidewalk waiver?
I believe that we will, once we get a little further down the road, we probably will request a waiver for that portion, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by commissioners? Hearing none, I entertain a motion on part 4A, the subdivision, which is recommended for tentative approval.
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I'm missing something. This was for the plan unit development and the subdivision, correct?
No, it was just for
Subdivision.
Okay, I'm sorry. You're breaking up, so I'm hearing parts.
It was just for the subdivision.
Okay.
I will now entertain a motion for the PUD.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, findings of facts, A, B, and D.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Item passes. Item number 5. 3755 Cottage Hill Road and 704 Lakeside Drive West, subdivision and zoning. Both parts recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Do you have any additional questions or comments? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
We are.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody to speak against this?
No, sir, we received no correspondence or comments in opposition.
Any questions or comments by commissioners? Hearing none, we'll take it as one, part A and B, subdivision and zoning. Is there a motion?
I'd move to approve subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Item passes. Item number 6, 107.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Mr. Gant, I hate to do this, but on the second part of that application, oh, never mind, I'm sorry. Apologize for that. That was my meeting. Never mind.
No problem. Item number 6, 107 and 111 North Lafayette Street and 106 Providence Street. It is a subdivision, PUD, and planning approval. I'll recommend it for approval. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Have you seen staff recommendations? Do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I have. Hold on a minute. There's a delay on YouTube with you, but we're okay with all the recommendations except on the subdivision. Condition number 2, I think we could delete that one because traffic engineering comments covers it. Items G and H is dedicating the corner radius or is approved by city engineer at one corner and the other corner in H. And it's a duplication by leaving number 2 in there. Other than that, we're okay with all of the conditions.
Does the engineering have any comment or staff regarding that?
Engineering is not on the call, but Mary Beth with traffic engineering is on the call.
Yes, we have had emails with the applicant, myself and Nick Amberger, which I don't believe he is here, about the corner radius dedication, and we aren't going to require it. But as Mr. Bird has said, the comments that engineering has made, allowing it at our discretion will be satisfactory. If there's any restriction on requiring it in an earlier comment, then that can be stricken.
Great.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments by commissioners?
Mary Beth, you're okay with G and H being removed, correct?
I'm
No.
sorry, I don't have the recommendations in front of me, but I believe they are engineering's comments. Are they both in regard to the corner radius? Yes.
Yes.
I think Mr. Hembry, Mr. Bird's point was that the engineering comments could remain because it makes it a discretionary decision, and that the condition number 2 is not discretionary and could be removed since it is addressed by the engineering conditions.
under subdivision requirements, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, sorry, I got that backwards.
Any additional questions or comments by commissioners? Was there anyone admitted to speak against this?
No, there is not.
Hearing none, we will take it in 3 parts. Item A, subdivision recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
I've moved to approve subject to staff recommendations, omitting condition number 2.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passed. Item B, PUD, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Motion so made.
There has to be findings of fact.
Is that with
Any
all
findings?
findings of fact?
Yes.
All of them apply.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passed. Item C, planning approval, recommended for tentative approval, including findings of facts. Is there a motion?
Move to
I
approve.
move to approve. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, findings of facts, A, B, and C.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Item passes. Item D, zoning, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Item passed. That concludes our applications. Our other business, item A, the call for public hearing concerning the Unified Development Code. Shayla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that Mayor Stimson may be joining us briefly to make make some comments, and after he wraps up, I'll walk us through the mechanics of this process.
Thank you, Shayla. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you letting me join. You know, we've been talking about UDC for quite a while now, and we're getting to that point where it's now before the Planning Commission. So I've said it in the past, and I'm going to say some of this will be repetitive, but it's worth repeating. And this is a once in maybe a generational opportunity that occurs in a city, and we really need to take advantage of it. It's been over 60 years since our code has really been looked at from top to bottom, and it has been a very laborious project of interacting with a lot of people to try to get it right. You know, we have early on, we committed to a continuous long-range planning efforts under Diane Irby. This was one of the things that we decided that needed to be done because it creates so much confusion because of differing languages that can be found throughout the code and different interpretations by different people. But we set a goal, and that was to preserve and sustain Mobile's neighborhoods while trying to remove regulatory barriers to growth and revitalization. I mean, that is a stated goal. It's to preserve and sustain our neighborhoods while removing regulatory barriers to growth and revitalization. You know, I was, every time I look at a population estimate of the city of Mobile and recently about Mobile County, and you look at why do we continue to lose people to Baldwin County? And because when it talked about Mobile was losing more people per capita than any county in the state, excuse me, it was losing more people for any county in the state. You know, I have said, and I believe that the challenges that we inherited in our zoning codes, in our permitting, combined with dilapidated neighborhoods or neighborhoods in decline, you know, it's not going to change until we change the way we're doing things. And we have made some tremendous progress in permitting. We've made tremendous progress in blight and blight removal, thanks to so many different people. But now we have got to address the current code under the Unified Development Code plan that Shayla has put up. Now, it's been 4 years effort. I mean, there hasn't hardly been anything that we've worked on 4 years other than the purchase of the Brooklyn by the Bay property and the bridge. So there are a couple out there. But anyway, they've done a great job in trying to listen to community stakeholders. There were over 200 stakeholder meetings, either with neighborhood groups, business associations, nonprofits. And so everybody has known this has been going on. So we've made a significant investment of taxpayer dollars. We've made a tremendous investment of hours of staff time and expertise. We've had outside expertise. So anyway, I know that she's excited to be at this point. And so let the process roll on. And I certainly appreciate anything that y'all can do to help us move this forward. So thank you, Shayla.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. So as the mayor stated, the staff respectfully requests that the commission would call for our first public hearing on February the 25th. The draft articles, what we refer to as the final draft, was uploaded to the website before the close of 2020. And so this launches our efforts to communicate widely with your consent that the new draft is available for review. Obviously, we would move forward through our procedures and processes for advertising in compliance with our state code requirements. But having said that, as the slide indicates, this has been an iterative process for us. We've published up until this point 3 drafts up all along the way, giving our citizens and stakeholders an opportunity to offer feedback into this process. We've learned a lot. We've heard a lot. We've tried to problem solve all along the way. But by calling for this public hearing, we're moving into the formal engagement process where we would be asking our citizens to come before this body to register their feedback and input. Next slide, Margaret. Over the past many months, as the mayor indicated, in total, we've had over 200 meetings since this process began. As we initiated and started to hunker down on version 2, we convened 75 small group meetings. We received over 600 comments that were collected on the zoning map alone, and with an additional 400 comments that were collected regarding the various draft articles that we've presented. So there's been a lot of information that we've been poring over, going back through our notes in terms of comments that we've received to reflect what you will see in the final draft. Next slide. The COVID-19 situation obviously presented some hurdles, but I'm pleased to report that we've tried our best to think outside of the box and overcome those challenges. Starting in March, the draft 3 version was presented. We held a series of virtual meetings with the previous stakeholder groups. We also met with our technical advisory committee group. Those are the experts that provided us with technical expertise, whether it was engineering, architectural, private property matters, environmental issues, where we were leaning on the folks who are typically the users of the code to provide us with feedback. That convening was used to hold a live streamed meeting where the public had the opportunity to listen in to that discussion. But we wrapped up our work in June with what we called our virtual community meeting. Some of you participated in that. The purpose of that was to give the public an opportunity to pre-register through our live streaming tools so that they could communicate with us directly on those meetings. All of that information has been continuously updated to our Map for Mobile website, where it can still be found, so that we were ensured that the public maintained the opportunity to engage with us on this important topic. Next slide. So the final product that you will see with respect to the code is a companion document which serves to report back on the feedback that we've heard. It is a document that includes all of the comments that we heard or received in writing or through feedback from folks communicating with us directly in writing on concerns or issues that they identified in the document. We captured all of those comments into this report, but what it's a helpful piece in that it identifies the issue, it tells you who issued or registered a response or a comment, but then how we chose to respond to that comment, either through an edit or a revision to the document. It is organized by articles so that you know where to go in the document to find that change. It is a lengthy document, but it intends to capture all of the comments that we receive. We will be posting this information onto the Map for Mobile website, and we will be disseminating it to our city council members as well, so that they have a very thorough understanding of what we heard in response to the UDC version 3. So with that, as I stated, all of this information is on the Map for Mobile website. We will be sending out an email blast shortly to all of the stakeholders that either registered with us in the early stages of this process up until now, so that they are aware of the upcoming public hearing. Obviously, this will be advertised in our local newspaper periodicals, so that our goal of reaching transparency is accomplished, and pointing everyone to the February 25th public hearing if the commission gives us consent today. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. You're on mute, Libba.
I really didn't have a question. I apologize for that.
Oh, okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to commend y'all's work though. You've done a great job.
Great job.
Thank you.
Great job.
Well, I appreciate the support and from the commission, as well as your patience. Our goal was not to rush through this. We wanted to give staff ample time to put forward a good product, but we wanted to work in concert with our community partners to try to understand their viewpoint. I'll just say that this is when you're trying to strive to preserve our neighborhoods and our quality of life, while balancing that with our regulatory requirements, our legal requirements, with making sure that we're streamlining our procedures where appropriate and necessary. Gaining consensus is an important piece in this puzzle. So I appreciate you all for understanding the work that's involved, and we look forward to moving toward the next step.
Taylor, I agree with Libby. Y'all done an amazing job. I think this will be a huge improvement for our city going forward in the future. I'm excited to see how it unfolds and see the improvements coming with growth and just overall general quality of life in our community. Walk us through the process, if you don't mind. Just we call for this public hearing, and then what's the next step after that?
So then essentially you would host the hearing on the 25th. So know that leading up to that process, citizens, stakeholders will be given the opportunity to go to our website, pour through the document, read through the companion piece to understand how we've responded and made necessary revisions and changes where appropriate. But they'll also be given an opportunity to sign up to speak and communicate through our web portal, where we'll be bringing that information to you for the February 25th hearing. We are assuming that in February that this will likely be another virtual meeting. So we'll be taking extra efforts to make sure that all participants have the opportunity to track along with us in this process. Once that hearing is conducted, where the Planning Commission is required to host a public hearing, we would be looking for the commission to give guidance and direction. But at the end of the day, your responsibility in this process would be to offer a recommendation, which is ultimately forwarded to the City Council. Once that recommendation is forwarded to the City Council, this ordinance, it's a legal document, is in their hands, and then it will follow their channels for adoption. And so we assume that will somewhat mimic the process that we've laid out before you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
In mind, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, are there any other questions or comments?
I was just going to move that that the commission call for the public hearing to take public comment on whether the commission should recommend to the council that the Unified Development Code be adopted to replace the current zoning ordinance, and have that hearing on February 25th.
I'll second that.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of calling for public hearing on February 25th?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Item passes. Public hearing will be called for February 25th. This is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item B, we're now opening the public hearing to take public comment on whether the commission should recommend to the Mobile City Council that the zoning ordinance chapter 64 of the Mobile City Code be amended by deleting therefrom section 64-4.h tree protection requirements, and whether the commission should also recommend that the city council create a new city code chapter for tree protection.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I will provide an overview and then go over the comments that have been submitted, as well as we have two people that are registered and have been admitted into the meeting to speak. Just to give you some background on why this proposed amendment, comments received as part of the public outreach process for the UDC included Tree Commission comments that were approved at their March 19th, 2019 meeting when they were reviewing draft version 2. And they stated that the public interest in the Tree Commission are better served by an urban forester rather than planning. We agree with that. And we also have in the meeting the city's urban forester, Peter Toller. And this necessitates that these requirements be removed from the zoning ordinance. Elements of the section to be removed, which is 64-4H, include tree commission duties and responsibilities, tree trails, tree removing and tree removal permits, and the appeal process for these tree permits, which are in conflict with state law. The reason why we are advocating this or proposing this is to respond to concerns from the Tree Commission. The elements of this section are urban forestry and tree commission functions, not planning functions. And again, as written, it is in conflict with state law. As the commission may recall, the staff also proposed a draft to the city code to continue tree protections. The draft is, quote, Chapter 65. Its basis is currently what is in the zoning ordinance with some modifications for compliance with state law. It was provided so that everyone can see what will be provided to the city council as their working document for tree protection via a separate city code chapter. The substance of the proposed Chapter 65 cannot be considered by the Planning Commission. It is solely a city council amendment. Just to give the commission some additional information regarding the order of amending text in the zoning ordinance. A deletion of the text of the zoning ordinance by state law must be reviewed by the Planning Commission before going to the City Council. Amendments to other chapters of the City Code, such as proposed Chapter 65, are not under the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission cannot hold a public hearing on Chapter 65. The Planning Commission cannot make a recommendation regarding the elements of Chapter 65. However, the Commission may recommend that the City Council adopt tree protection requirements as part of another city code section. But again, nothing specific regarding the elements thereof. Once the Planning Commission makes a recommendation on removing or not removing 64-4H from the zoning ordinance, that recommendation, along with the proposed Chapter 65, will be forwarded to the City Council for public hearing and adoption. The City Council, in accordance with state law, will then consider both the recommendation of the Planning Commission regarding 64-4H of the zoning ordinance and the proposed Chapter 65, including the specific elements of Chapter 65. The City Council public hearing, or hearings if they so choose, will be the public's opportunity to discuss the elements of Chapter 65 and any proposed amendments to the document as written. The only item on the Planning Commission's agenda today is 64-5H and whether it should be deleted from the zoning ordinance. And if so, should the council amend the city code to provide tree protection requirements via a separate city code chapter? Does anyone from the commission have any questions of staff regarding that overview?
Margaret, if I may, let me just sort of go back over and summarize what I heard you saying to make sure that we're understanding on the same page. But so we're 64-4H is the chapter we're talking about considering removing, correct?
Correct. It is a, just to be specific and tediously so, it's a section in the city code chapter.
Okay, so we're considering removing that chapter and then making a recommendation that that chapter be replaced by a new chapter 65, which the city council would take up and adopt with all the new requirements, or would planning commission make those recommendations as far as the requirements in it?
The only recommendation that is required of the commission is whether or not to delete 64(4)H. You may also recommend that the council adopt tree protection requirements via a separate section of the city code, but that's the extent of it.
It's just a
correct of the recommendation.
And then once that's done, I mean, obviously we've got to have tree protection. So that would be up to the city council to establish those new requirements, working with the urban forestry department.
With city staff, interested citizen groups, etc. The reason Chapter 65 was put out there is to provide that baseline working document to give to the city council so that tree protections remain in place, that there's not a gap in the city's authority to protect trees.
Good, yeah, wonderful.
If I could add, and I'm not sure if Margaret's comments included all of this, but a lot of the comments that the staff received this week concerning this public hearing dealt with the substance of what Chapter 65 would be. And that's not before y'all today. And hopefully the people who are speaking at the hearing will understand that we are not to hear today comments concerning what 65 might be. All we're here today is to decide, should we recommend it be a separate chapter? It's up to the city council to determine what would be adopted moving forward. Thank you.
I have a question of Margaret.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Margaret. On 64H is what you're recommending that be removed, and then this new protection code come forward for tree protection. Can you give a summary of 64H? Or if it was sent to us, could you resend it to the commissioners? What we're removing, what we're asked to remove?
It's 19 parts. There's no
Okay.
way.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so it's in the main book is what you're saying, that that would all be removed. And I know when the other day when the council was talking, I have a motive to this madness. When the council was talking about adopting new short-term rental, there was concerns from the administration about doing something so that it didn't change in the midstream. So can you tell me, since I know this has been in the works for a very long time, how does our former, what stays put in the former when it comes to the land use for development, and what is the 65 that would be new? Are they going to mesh all together appropriately and have the same exact standards in place?
I think I have my arms around your question. We are proposing right now that tree protections come out of zoning and be their own separate city code chapter. And in the UDC draft that is out there, tree protections are not addressed. What will remain in the zoning ordinance now and what is proposed in the UDC are still tree planting requirements. landscaping based on your property frontage, this many trees, if you choose this type, are required. So plantings and landscaping are still part of the zoning ordinance and the proposed UDC.
Okay, I thought I thought I saw that, and I saw where it's the director that has the final word on landscaping plans. Whereas I would be, if we've got this protection over in 65 of different species and how they're to be planted in order to survive, not just on our rights of way, but even on private property. Is there any thought in making the urban forester the final word on landscaping plans so that you have the left and the right knowing everything? Was that a thought that transpired at all?
I will say this, and then Bert and others may need to speak up. As you may recall, we had a Right Tree, Right Place committee that came up with planting lists, trees, and the areas that they need in order to survive.
Right.
We had representatives, arborists, people from the community, and those planting areas are part of the proposed UDC. Now, I will say this, I don't anticipate now or in the future anyone in planning, if they have a question as to whether or not a proposed tree is viable in a certain area, given its, if not just its square footage, its topography, its slope or whatever, we're going to pick up the phone and call Peter.
Right. Oh, yeah, whoever is our urban forester. Right. I'm just wondering if that wording would, would be important, especially when we have the separate code. I see the value in the separate code. Like I said, I know a lot of manpower, thought process, and the community wanting us to protect our tree canopy. I know Peter is present. I would love to hear his overall, take on this and his, information that he wishes to share with the commissioners today.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go right ahead.
Chapter 65 is a step forward in the tree canopy for Mobile. It brings tree protection and compliance with ANSI standards. That's been our basis on Chapter 65. A lot of people ask what's the right thing to do with a tree. And speaking to many urban foresters, certified arborists, board certified master arborists, factoring all this around ANSI standards gives me great pride in knowing that we can preserve our canopy to last for the next several generations to come.
Okay, great. Any other comments, questions, or inquiries by commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a comment. I think that a lot of times we have folks that talk about tree protection, but tree protection is big enough and important enough that it warrants its own chapter. There's no magic or extra utility in having it lumped in with zoning. So I think it's just important to recognize for those who were speaking against it. I think much of what they were talking about was about the substance of something they perceive that might come into existence. But really, we're just taking this and putting it elsewhere and making it compliant with state law. Whatever comes out of this is totally within the realm of the city council. And they have all of this, all the same requirements for transparency and everything, and all the reason in the world to do, the committees and everything else. So I don't think I don't think anything's being derailed here. There's no need for a perception there's going to be a gap in protection for the trees. And, ultimately, I think that, one of the comments that I read in a couple a couple of the things we received yesterday and today was that the idea that there's just going to be carte blanche authority vested in some individual to cut down any tree ever, and that doesn't line up with anything. Nobody has carte blanche authority except those who are given that by state law, which there's nothing we can do about anyway. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or observations by commissioners? Anything else from staff before we take responses from the public?
Yes, I just wanted, for the record, to read in the names of those that have submitted comments that have been provided to the Planning Commission. Bill Boswell, Chris Enzor, Debbie Foster, Sue Cato Winter, Catherine Flowers, Brenda Bolton, who submitted 2 sets of comments, Joseph Mahoney, and Carol Adams Davis with the Mobile Bay Sierra Club. Mr. Chairman, we have in the meeting Teresa Tessner and Anna Bush, who have both signed up to speak.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to speak first?
I can.
Go, you have the floor.
Hi, this is Anna Bush. I live at 21 Bienville Avenue. I had submitted comments, but you may have clarified a lot of that. One of the biggest questions I had was that once it was bifurcated, clearly bifurcated, we had the 64 being recommended to be deleted, but we don't have a 65 in any kind of a formal final form. We're kind of buying a pig in a poke, but there's no pig. So I wanted to be sure that I understood that the decision to get rid of 64H was contingent upon 65 being accepted, which is literally how 65 reads. Section 1 of that is 64.4H is deleted. And so I want to be sure I understand that correctly. In fact, there is not that gap. Well, we don't have 64, but guess what? We don't have 65 either.
Yeah, there isn't a gap because this is merely a recommendation to the city council. There's nothing to examine in 65 because 65 doesn't exist. This is just us recommending that the tree protection be taken and made into its own chapter. So it's not a pig in a poke because it's not anything. It's just a recommendation to the city council.
So that is my question. We're not today saying we are now deleting 64 and we just wait around.
No, ma'am, we're not getting rid of 64. We're just moving it on its own freestanding ordinance.
Okay.
It would still be in existence until the new chapter is advertised and passed.
Okay. That was not clear, at least not to me, which
sure.
Sometimes things aren't very clear to me. And then the other, and I guess that would also answer this question, was that, the 64H applied to non-R1, R2 properties. And I wanted to make sure that I'm understanding that there's not going to be a disparate treatment if this goes away for commercial properties, for example, that R1 and R2 are still subject to it. But again, it sounds like what you're telling me is it's simply that won't happen until 65 is a done deal.
Right.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, assuming we move forward with that, will all tree questions at that point be solely under, I guess, the urban forester and then the city council, or will there be a commission similar? I mean, because I don't think, if I understood correctly, the tree commission doesn't really have the recommendation authority that the planning and zoning does. In other words, if someone were to need to make a change to property involving trees, is that going straight to the city council?
No. So everything that happens now with regards to protected trees, with them going to the tree commission, would still, we're just taking what we have now and moving it. So the tree commission that exists, like tree decisions would not go straight to the city council. They would be inundated. They get tired of that.
I thought, Lord, let's be long meetings. Okay, I think that clarifies that. Like I said, my major thing was to be sure I understood that we were not, I couldn't believe we would be, but stranger things I suppose have happened, that we were not tossing 64 before we had a replacement. So I appreciate that. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
good afternoon. This is Teresa Tessner speaking. I'm the Vice Chair for the Tree Commission. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the Planning Commission regarding this potential change. When version 3 of the proposed UDC, the zoning code rewrite, was presented for public input this past spring, the Tree Commission submitted comment expressing its concern that tree protection ordinances were being removed from the section of the code that regulates activities most likely to impact trees, namely the planning, development, and construction codes. It is the Tree Commission's position that tree protection should remain within the zoning code so that tree protections are not overlooked during development, so that there's no confusion as to the applicability of tree protections, and so that tree preservation and protection plays an integral role in the planning and development process from the beginning. Preserving, protecting, and maintaining trees should be as much a part of any project as determining that the setback is correct or that the plumbing is being installed to code. For that to happen, the city needs tree protection and management ordinances that explicitly detail how to accomplish this. These ordinances need to incorporate industry standards and best practices and include substantive mechanisms for enforcement. And they should be within the zoning code, where the other guidelines regarding development are also found. Developing and adopting the codes that would meet these objectives should include the engagement of a consultant with urban forestry and development and planning expertise, the participation from the beginning of an advisory board composed of stakeholders, and we would respectively ask that a representative from the Tree Commission also be included, and include well-advertised opportunities for public input prior to any of the hearings required for adoption. In summary, we ask that you recognize the importance of laying out tree protections as part of the planning and development process and not remove them from the zoning code. And we ask that you use a process similar to what was used to develop the UDC to develop improved tree protection and management regulations that incorporate industry standards and best practices for the preservation, protection, and management of trees. Thank you.
Questions or comments from commissioners?
I think that was very articulate, very well stated. I would like to hear from our urban forester and how he sees the meshing between zoning and exactly what was mentioned when we moved it out and put it into 65, because there'll still be the landscaping codes. So because that's a concern that I do have as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, in the proposed draft, chapter 65, from top to bottom, side to side, the American National Standard Institute A300 was our primary source to author the proposed draft, chapter 65. We have incorporated anywhere from root management to pruning practices to pest management, anything in chapter 65 where it would refer back to when I went to school to become an arborist, the ANSI A300 codes. That is the foundation of chapter 65 from top to bottom, side to side.
So Peter, are you saying that that would be also blend into new development when those plans were being reviewed?
Yes. If someone said, how do you coexist around this tree? In chapter 65, that is completely laid out, from tree protection to root management to how much you would want to prune off this tree, to to extend the healthcare of this tree. I mean, it is 100% pro tree in chapter 65, 100%.
And you're saying that that blends in and would be automatically incorporated. It's no longer a zoning, but it would be a standard that would have to be followed for landscaping plans. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I'll add to Ms. Pappas's comment earlier. The right tree, right place list that is laid out in the ANSI standards for planting on how trees should be spaced. When a new development comes in, Councilman Rich, and they want to install new trees, anywhere from how deep the trees are planted to how they're spaced out. This will ensure that trees are able to grow, retain their natural shape, and give full benefit to the community.
Mr. Chair, if I might. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I might, the Tree Commission and I personally truly appreciate the fact that the incorporation of the ANSI standards, the industry standards, the best practices, that there is a move to update our tree protections to include those. I guess where the Tree Commission that is obviously a concern of the Tree Commission. A separate concern of the Tree Commission, and the one that I'm really trying to articulate here today, is that we are concerned that by removing those explicit instructions from the part of the code where developers, planners are going to look for what they need to do, there's a very high chance that those protections might not be put in place. And then I'm not aware of what version 4 of the UDC says as far as that, but the last version of the UDC that the Tree Commission saw did not really do what we thought was an adequate job to mesh that into the process, so that there's just as much of a checklist for whether you're doing your trees and your tree protections and your tree plantings, the whole thing, as well as making sure that you've got your electrician in to have that the inspector sign off on that before they close the wall. That's where our very large concern is.
You know, if all of our tree stuff is in the zoning ordinance, it kind of makes me wonder, would we even need a tree commission at that point? Because if it's going to be a question of planning, it should just come to the planning commission. Just a thought.
I have a question on that too. Wouldn't we not just because it's a big deal, but in the recommendations and conditions of the planning commission to comply with all of the city ordinances and requirements of tree planting and maintenance, that would become a standard part of planning, right? Just like,
yes.
like we
Yes.
we have to comply with the fire ordinance and we have to comply with the water retention and all of that. This becomes you still have to do it, even though it's not spelled out in our responsibilities, but you must comply with it because it's a city ordinance.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
that's
it's on
that's a
the
very
stuff
good
now.
point. That's an excellent point to make, that we leave it in the hands of the professionals, but we say they have to meet those codes and regulations. So if this is coming out as a separate code, so to speak, with different regulations, I think when we look at the landscaping part, then maybe we just make sure that it doesn't say director who has the final say. We would say the urban forester, because it would be in keeping with what this new chapter is all about, that they have to adhere to and follow. And so I think if anything, I see the concerns that citizens have, and especially someone who sits on the tree commission. I applaud your volunteerism for doing that, because it's so important to citizens and not everyone has the time or the energy to do so. And you're right to be protective of the language and making sure that it is all going in the same direction, that there isn't any mess step. And so when the council, if this is recommended and the council has a hearing, this will be the time to inform my colleagues on what they need to look for when the new UDC codes come up, and you've highlighted it. And it would be something that we would be sure to keep it so that the standards were the same and the review was very similar to ensure, the concerns of not having, so to speak, teeth in anything, I guess, for lack of a better term.
So it basically puts the responsibility on the developer to get guidance from the people who know what they're talking about, and not a group, not that we don't know what we're talking about sometimes, but there are more people that are more well-equipped to handle urban forestry issues.
And they make
And
the
it also-
inspections
Right?
because
And
they're
it's
the
just sending them
professionals.
to be reviewed.
And it doesn't presume
That's right.
that the developers are going to intentionally avoid some part of the law.
Nobody's saying that. It's just the left, it's everything all, gelling up together.
Yeah, obviously, Mr. Toa has a lot better grasp on how to take care of trees than we do as a commission, and I respect that. And I think there's value in having somebody, in that position, making those decisions, setting those standards and enforcing those standards that actually knows what they're doing. So I'm in favor of making this transfer from 64 to 65. We're just making a mechanical change and how we deal with it. There was one question that I had just for Margaret, or maybe for Doug. You'd mentioned in your beginning of your presentation that there was some legal issues with the way we have it currently structured. Would you mind addressing that?
Margaret, can you do that? Because I was unaware of the procedural aspect of that. I was looking more at the end result and not how we got there.
Within 64H now, there is a section on appeals, and the appeals are set up. If it's in a historic district, it's supposed to go to the corresponding review board. And then I believe appeals of the urban forester's decision are to go to the planning commission. And that is in complete conflict with state law.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Very much. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
So if we were to take this up, do we need to take it up as two separate recommendations, or can we lump it into one recommendation, Margaret?
I think you can do it into one, and quite frankly, staff would prefer it, because if the commission is agreeable to recommending the deletion of 64(4)H, we would want the planning commission to also recommend that a separate city code chapter be adopted for tree protection, so that there is no gap.
Okay. Well, I would make that recommendation. I would make the motion that we recommend the deletion of 64-4H, titled Tree Protection Requirements, and recommend the creation of a new code chapter for tree protection and management.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes. Recommendation is made to the city council. Thank you for your time and efforts on this, participation in this. Staff, do you have any additional comments or questions?
No, we appreciate the commission's patience with both this process and the UDC to come. If any of the commission members have any questions, please reach out to staff. We will be more than happy to meet with you. Also, if someone needs a hard copy, please let us know.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
No other business before us. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.